All right, on with the show. Okay. Well, first off, I want to say good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It was, I'll be very honest. Nancy called me and said, what are the chances that you would be free on March 7th? And this is about 6 months ago. So at that time, I was like, of course I'll be free. Now fast forward to today, there's about 800 things happening, but that's okay. But I was so, I don't want to say shocked, but I was very honored and surprised when she was like, we would love to have you talk at the CDA for this retreat. And I don't know why I was shocked, but in my mind, you guys should be telling me things. I don't know why I'm here to tell you things. And so I said to Nancy, well, what do you want me to talk about? And she's like, just talk about your faith journey, God's plan in your life and things like that. And I said, okay, I can do that. I talk every day to kids. It is extremely intimidating to stand in front of a group of women who are faithful and amazing and be like, hey, let me tell you how to be a better Catholic. So today is, I literally, as I was preparing for this, I had a lot of prayer, a lot of kind of letting the Holy Spirit guide me through this. But in my mind, I am very much the appetizer for today's event. So, there's not going to be a ton of frill. We're going to get things started. Christy is definitely going to be your entree. I am so excited for her. I know it's going to be amazing. And then Father will be our dessert. So I know they are going to have a dynamic and amazing talk, and I'm going to do my absolute best. So without further ado, I always like to kick things off with a little bit of humor. I think that comes with teaching kids. You have to keep things spicy, I guess I would say, in order to keep the attention as you move forward. So I apologize. I have all my notes on my phone. That is a little bit of technology in me, but so in thinking about just like my faith journey and how I've kind of got to where I am in my life. Everything started with there's a lot of defining moments that everyone has, I think, in their lives, and things that they have encountered or experienced, and those help to build them into their faith. That helps to build them into who they are and where they're going through their lives. So mine all started pretty early in my childhood. I am beyond blessed. I have amazing parents. I have an amazing family. I had a great childhood. And so it's, I don't have those hardships and those things that you're like, wow, that really defined you. It's always funny, my mom's always like, you say you had such a great childhood. And she's like, but we didn't have much. We were farmers. Everything my parents had, they built themselves. But to learn the lessons of like hard work, determination, faith. We did not miss Mass on Sunday. One time I had cat scratch fever in 5th grade. Long story, it's a real disease. And so that was the first time I ever missed Mass. It was when my dad found a 6 a.m. Mass that was at the St. Mary's Hospital, and when it was fall and spring and we were in the fields, we were at 6 a.m. Mass, us, whatever visiting priest was there, and maybe 1 or 2 people from the hospital. But it was, faith was a huge component of our family. My mom and dad were extremely involved in our parish. My mom became Catholic after she married my dad, and so they were really involved in the RCIA program. Just wonderful examples of faith and how to live your life and how to work hard and do the things that you need to do. I always like to tell a funny story about my dad. He was a farmer through and through. Faith, family, farming. That was it. That was life. And when I was young, I went to St. Anthony's for grade school, and I have the voice of an angel. I will say that. It's a little known fact, Joni. I cannot join the choir. I don't have time for that right now. But I always had a lead in the Christmas program. So even when I was little, I would always get picked to do a solo. And so it was like that was kind of like my thing, my shining thing with. You always have the competition with your siblings. I'm the youngest of 4, so that was my thing. Was I had this solo for the Christmas program, and I remember the one year I was really jazzed because it was like a true solo, like it was a real deal. And so I'm practicing all for months at the house, and I'm all excited about it. And we get that to the night of the performance, and I'm up at St. Anthony's, and we have it in the parish, in the church, and I remember I'm like in the sacristy, in the wings, watching and seeing, and I look out and I see, I'm like, oh, there's my grandma, there's my grandpa, there's my mom, there's an empty seat, there's my brother, there's my sister. And I remember thinking, oh, where's my dad? What are you doing? Where's my dad? And I was so upset because I'm like, he's at the farm. Those pigs are more important than me. And I remember just being so devastated. I think I was in like second grade, and just being so upset about it. But I knew that was what was important. We knew that was what we needed to do. We had to work. All of us had our jobs out there. And so I go out there, in my little costume, and of course, I do a stellar performance. And it was funny because during it, I'm singing my little heart out, and afterwards, I kind of I step back, and then the next person comes up, and I remember there was kind of like a little bit of a hustle and bustle in the back of the church, and I'm like, so I'm kind of watching and looking, and all of a sudden, it was like a slap in the face. I smelled manure. And I look, and standing dead in the back of the church, right next to the radiator, is my dad. Covered in, I'm assuming, what was manure at that time. So there had obviously been something that went awry at the farm, and so he had to stay, fix it, but made sure he was there, standing in the back, didn't care that there was probably 300 people in St. Anthony's Church thinking, what in the world is this smell? It's my dad. But to see, that is one of my core memories of my childhood. To know that, wow, that is love. That is a parent. My mom is an amazing person, but it's like that is one of those moments of my dad that I always I keep it in my pocket, and I kind of carry it with me. The reason being, so August 29th, 1992, I was 11 years old. It was a regular day, just like any other day in the summer. Mom, Dad, and my brother were working on the farm, and my older sister was in the house. She was actually getting ready to go to her job in town in Streator. Mindy and I were doing our chores, and out of nowhere, all of a sudden, a couple of our neighbors showed up, and they came in the house, and we're like, what is going on? And we heard some sirens and different things were happening, and we're like, what is going on? What is going on? And my sister went outside, and right away our neighbor stopped her, and he took her outside, and they pushed me and Mindy back in the house, like, go to your rooms, go to your rooms. And we're like, what is happening here? A few months before that, my uncle was mowing ditches, and a car had hit him on the tractor, and so we're like, he was hurt, thank God he was not killed, but we're thinking, oh my gosh, something terrible has happened. You hear the sirens, something's going on. But right away, don't go out. So the first thing Mindy and I did, we went into our bedroom, and we knelt down next to our bed, and we started to pray. Because we knew that if you pray, God listens to you, and he answers your prayers. In my mind, God was Santa Claus. You ask for a gift, and that's what you get. And so we just prayed, and we prayed. And I'll never forget our one neighbor, her son, standing outside of our bedroom door, and he was just watching us. And he's like, what are you doing? And we just kept saying, we're praying, because we knew it would be okay. It wasn't okay. My dad and brother were both killed that day. And also another young man who worked with us. And so our entire world changed. So when I say I had a really great childhood, sometimes my mom's like, but I did. I had this amazing foundation. And then that happened, and literally our entire world changed. My mom is the strongest, most amazing human being I know. Anyone who could lose your husband and your child in one event, and then can still get up and live your life every single day, and continue to raise your other children, and continue to run your farm, and do everything that you had planned with your husband. Don't know that I could do that. I'll be the first to say, I don't know that I could do that. But that was one of those defining moments in life where you have your two paths and you must choose. I was only 11. So I just continued down my, this is our new normal. Within a few, the next couple weeks were all a blur. I really don't remember. I think your brain does that to you, though. It protects you, especially when you're young. So there's flashes of different random things that I'll remember, but I don't really remember much those first few weeks. Probably for the best. But we went back to school soon, and we just started our new lives, and that was the new normal. My mom, God bless her, she thought, of course she put me in Midian counseling. We refused to talk to the counselor, we would just talk to each other. And the counselor was like, so how are you feeling? And we're like, so what do you want to do after school today? I mean, this poor man, God bless him. But he did tell my mom, he's like, the best thing you can do is keep them busy, get them in sports. So that's exactly what my mom did. She put us in everything that she could find under the sun, and she would go out at 3 in the morning, she'd get chores done, and then she made sure she was at school by 3 o'clock to pick us up, and we were off and running. But it ended up being probably one of the best things she could have done for us, was to just push us to find things that we could exert energy. I'm a little high strung. And then also, for us to find something that we were passionate about and we enjoyed. But she also continued to push us to stay faithful. We stayed at St. Anthony's. When it came high school time, we thought for sure she was gonna let us go to Streeter. We lived in Woodland District, but we were like, oh, Mom will pay out of district tuition so we can go to Streeter High School. Yeah, no, that was not Mom's plan. And she was like, so where do you want to go to school? And Mindy and I were like, we want to go to Streeter. And she was like, we're going to try this again. Where do you want to go to high school? And we were like, we want to go to Woodland? And she's like, one more chance. Where would you like to go to high school? My brother and sister both went to Marquette. We're graduates of Marquette. We're like, we want to go to Marquette. She's like, that's a great choice. That is a great choice. She's like, I think that's your choice. And we're like, okay, we're going to Marquette. So we grew up in Streeter, obviously, but Mr. Flavel, God bless him, he drove us on the bus at Cal Flavel. There's one and only. He drove us every day to school. Most days we were following the bus until they stopped at Kate Hughes's house, and then we would jump out of my mom's car and sprint up 23 and jump in. Occasionally we would catch Mr. Flavel at Hardee's. He did not appreciate when we would go in and get a biscuit beforehand, but yeah. So Mindy and I both went to Marquette High School as well. It was quite entertaining. My brother and sister were very, very quiet, super studious kids. Chad loved farming as much as my dad did. My older sister was into the theater and the choir, not really a sports kid. So when Mindy and I first came to Marquette, everyone was like, you're Kara and Chad's little sisters. We're like, we are. By the end of week 1, they were like, you are nothing like your brother and sister. And we're like, that we are. And plus there's 2 of us. I mean, I feel like it was unfair that they judged us that hard because there's 2 and we're spirited. So we had a little bit of a different high school experience than our siblings did. But like I said, my mom had put us in all these things, so we were super involved, very active. I loved high school. I had a really good time. And I would say there's several people who taught me at Marquette who are still currently there. I think many of them were surprised when I became the principal because they had known me in high school, so they would be like, I wouldn't have pegged you to be the girl. I wouldn't have either. So it was definitely, like I said, I lived my best life, had a lot of fun. Faith was always kind of in the background, just because I was in a Catholic school, because it was part of it. Was I a faithful person? No, I was not. I played the part very, very well. I am a fake it till you make it kind of girl. And I was very, very angry inside. I was very angry. Nobody knew that because again, you fake it till you make it. So I always had the smile on my face. I did the things I was supposed to do, encounter weekends, all those fun things. But I was very, very angry at God. Very angry. In my mind, like I said, I had the Santa Claus Jesus in my mind, and I just didn't understand why, when I'd asked for something so hard, that he wouldn't have done that for us, and why would he take someone like my dad, who was this amazing man, and my brother, who was only 19, who had his whole life ahead of him? Why would you do that? Why would you take them? I was angry. But everyone thought, oh, she's bubbly, she's happy, she's spirited, spicy. So my junior year rolls around, and we had Monsignor Halfaker was the chaplain at the time. He was actually the chaplain when my brother had passed too. So he had been at Marquette for about 10 years, 6-7 years at that point. And my junior year, he'd always taught senior religion. He took on one junior class, and he went to the principal and said, I want the top 20 kids in the class, and I'm gonna have a junior honors religion. I did not know I was in the top 20 at that point, but I was. And so I'm sitting in this classroom, and I'm looking around, and here is everyone who's super smart in my class. And I did well in school, but I didn't really try that hard. I didn't realize I was smart until college. And so I'm looking around the room, and I'm like, why am I in here? And Monsignor was like, he's like, this will be considered an honors level course. And so I raised my hand. I said, are we getting honors credit for this course? And he said, no. I was like, ooh. Stellar. But it ended up being one of the best things that could have possibly happened to me, because he put me in a situation that not only challenged me academically, but really started to challenge me spiritually. We do what we call senior retreat at the high school, and I feel like it is the best thing that we do at Marquette is our senior retreat. It is truly a game changer for our students. And so my junior year, like I said, I'm in my seniors class, and they used to do an invitation for senior retreat. We take 8 juniors to be leaders. And Monsignor would walk around with he had these envelopes, and so he would walk around and he would deliver it to you at lunchtime. So of course everyone knows what's happening. Monsignor's walking around, he's delivering them, and it's your usual suspects, the good kids. I don't want to say I was the good kids, let's be honest. It was the good kids. And so he's handing these envelopes out, and then he walks over to my table, my friends. We didn't expect him to walk our way. And he hands me this envelope, and I'm like, my eyes were huge. And so I was like, he hands it to me, and he says, I really hope you take this opportunity. Okay, so I open the envelope, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, they want me to be a leader at senior retreat, and my friends are like, ah! Again, I wouldn't have been the first choice, much like today. But it ended. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go. It's gonna be good. My mom really encouraged me to do it. So we get to senior retreat, and when I was in high school, it was strange. I think it's strange now. The kids overlap amazingly. Like, freshmen are hanging out with seniors, sophomores and juniors. It's a mixed bag at any given moment. It wasn't really like that when I was in high school. We had a few people who would overlap, but for the most part, seniors hung out with seniors, juniors hung out with juniors, sophomores, freshmen. And so I had a few friends in the senior class, but the other juniors who went weren't really my friend group. So I was like, oh, this is awkward. And I obviously like to talk. I'm a pretty outgoing person, but I got there and I was like, oh, this is the most uncomfortable situation I've ever been put in. We have all these people talking about their faith and their love for God and all these amazing experiences and things, and I'm sitting in the back like a black cat thinking this is the worst possible situation I could be in. Now, again, you fake it till you make it, so I was like, that is amazing. This is so fun. One of the girls, she gave her talk, and she was talking about, overcoming adversity. Come to find out later, it was because she didn't get the car she had anticipated. It was a different one. And in my mind, I am just melting. I'm like, you have no idea what life is like. People didn't really know. Some people who were around had known mine and Mindy's backstory, but we didn't really talk about it. It was kind of one of those, high school was a reset for us, so we didn't, go into the whole, I didn't play the dead dad card often. I just didn't like that, and Mindy we just didn't talk about it, so everyone kind of assumed that we just lived with our mom, and that was that. Some people did know, but most didn't bring it up. Monsignor Halfaker knew, though. And so it was it was definitely a difficult experience for me because I was not willing to open up my heart. I was not willing to open up my mind. And he came up to me during retreat at one point, and he said, he's like, how is your retreat going? I'm like, it's amazing, Monsignor. Thank you so much for inviting me to this, as I'm like sitting in the back by myself. And he's like, I really want you to take this opportunity. I really want you to take this opportunity to open up your heart. I said, I am. This is wonderful, thank you. And he walks away, and I'm like, but that was one of the first moments that I recognized, like, okay, something's going on here. Someone's, that was God saying to me, like, it's time. It's time to open up your heart again. Like I said, I was so closed off and so angry, but that was one of those first little, like, little seeds planted. And so we had adoration, and then we have adoration, and then they do what's called like a peer reconciliation. So the kids have a chance to talk about things with each other, if they've had falling out or things where they can kind of reconcile with each other. And like I said, I wasn't really like keen in the group with the seniors, so I talked to a couple people, but it was really, I went back to my room through a lot of that just because I was like, and we had single rooms too, which made it even worse because I'm not used to being by myself. I mean, I have a built-in like best friend with my sister, and we kind of, that was the first time we had ever been apart for more than a night, was when I went on retreat. So it was really, really hard. But I remember sitting in that room, and we had like a reflection journal, and that was one of the first times too where I just kind of started to write about what I was thinking and how I was feeling. And at one point, I think I was talking out loud. I'm sure people walking by were like, what is she doing? But I almost had it out with God, which sounds really weird, but in my like 16-year-old brain, that was what I needed. I needed to be able to tell him why I was so upset and why I was so angry and why wouldn't you listen to me? Well, those questions of why. Did I get answers? I certainly did not. At some point, I'm hoping, when I get to those pearly gates that he and I will have a nice discussion and maybe I'll get some answers, but I don't know if that's gonna happen either. But it also was a chance for me to, really open up my heart again and to start to allow God back in. Roll into my senior year retreat, and now I'm a leader, so now I have to present, I have to do these different things. And so I decided that was when I was going to talk about my dad and about my past. And it was probably the hardest thing I've ever done up until that point in my life, was to make myself vulnerable enough for people to see, because I'd always put on that good front. Like I said, I was the smiley kid, I was the happy kid. No one would have ever guessed there was any trauma or anything going on behind the scenes. And I'll never forget, Mindy was sitting like directly in front of me, again, in the back, shocking. And her eyes, when I started to talk, because she was like, no, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't tell them, don't do it. And I did, and it was like verbal diarrhea, and it just like went everywhere. But her face was just like, and I probably should have prepped her for it. I afterwards I was like, hey, I'm really sorry I did that. And she's like, no, it's okay. But we went into our small groups afterwards, and that was the first time for her too to talk about it. And she always talks about one of the kids in our class. She nicest guy you'd ever meet. She referred to him as like a teenage Santa Claus, because he was just like jovial and happy, and and during their small group he was like, Mindy, what happened? And she's like, what do you mean what happened? Mindy was a little more abrasive than I was in high school, and she's like, what do you mean what happened? And he's like, what happened? Like, Mindy's like, they died. What do you mean what happened? And he's like, do you want to talk about it? And she's like, not really. But that was that. All it took was that one person too for her to then her group talked, and they stayed. They missed dinner. They stayed there the whole time and just listened to her. And we had another friend of mine in our class. His mom had passed away our senior year as well, and so he and I, after I gave him my talk, we like sat there, and he was just like, you know how this feels. You know how this feels. And I'm like, well, yes and no. I mean, everybody's pain is different. Like, you can say, yes, I understand your pain, but I don't understand your pain. You know, I understand loss, and I understand how I did it, but to be able to talk about that was so healing, and just a huge moment for me, and like moving forward in my life. But I think the biggest piece was not just to be able to like heal from that trauma, but also to be able to like finally accept love again in its purest form from God. I mean, I always tell the kids, I hope you have the best senior retreat, because it truly changed my life. It changed my life. I feel like God puts people in your path throughout your life to help you along the way. You know, He has His plan. He has His plan for everyone, and I tell the kids this at school all the time too. God has a plan for you. You have to listen to His plan. Up until that point, I was not listening to His plan. I was definitely listening to my own plans. I did not really care about anything or anyone, but after a retreat, it was so huge. I mean, my junior year and then into my senior year. Like I said, there was these different people that were put along my way. You know, Monsignor was a huge one. Rob Thompson was a huge one, and I've never told Rob this. At some point, you feel free to tell him. He knew something, but he knew there was something inside of me and Mindy. He knew that there was leadership capabilities. He knew that, so he was always being like, hey, I want you to volunteer with this. I want you to do this. And I was like, Mr. Thompson, why are you obsessed with me? Like, joking, no. But no, but I mean, he was such an awesome teacher for me. And then he was my softball coach, and it was like, but he's like, you need to be a leader at Encounter Weekend. You need to, you know, he would always put me in these different situations. So without Marquette, in my high school years, I would not be the person I am today. Without having that structure of faith that was constantly available to me. Now, they lead the horse to the water. The horse did not drink often. I'll be the first to say that. But to continually have those opportunities, I definitely would not be the person I am without it. So, you know, that was another one of those like defining moments, and those defining people who were just there regularly to say, you know, here's your opportunity for the Lord. And they continually put those opportunities in front of me. So I graduate high school, I go on to college. When I got to college, I realized I was like, oh, hey, I'm kind of smart. Huh, that's weird. So I started to apply myself a little bit harder, and decided I was a pre-med major. And I was like, I'm going to be a doctor, and I'm going to go to Rwanda, and I'm going to save babies, and this is going to be amazing. And my junior year, I was in classes, and I had a professor who just completely turned me off to the idea of medicine, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do now? So I literally went back to my dorm room. I called my mom, and I said, Mom, I can't do this. I need to find something else. And she's like, you're not gonna be a doctor? I'm like, no, I'm not gonna be a doctor. And she's like, okay, what are you gonna do? I'm like, I have no idea. So I started to try and choose some different things, and that I took that moment, I sat down, and I remember praying about it. And I'm like, Lord, just tell me what is next. Just tell me what is next. I don't know what to do here. So I went to the registrar's office, because I was like, I'm gonna change some classes. I've gotta figure something out. Met with my advisor. And I thought, okay. And she's like, well, you could go into pharmacy. I'm like, well, I don't want to be in a basement, like, dishing out pills all day. So I was like, I could sell pharmaceuticals. I'm like, I'm a salesman. I can do that. So I decided I was going to sell pharmaceuticals. So I signed up for an economics class. It was like marketing and economic strategies and things like that. So I signed up for everything, get my new schedule. And on it, instead of, the tag number for the economics class was ECU, like 1003 or something. And instead, I get EDU 1001. I'm like, So I was like, huh. Oh my God, I do not want to be a teacher. I had no inkling for kids. I really didn't like kids, I'll be honest. And so I was like, yeah, this is not, I liked coaching. I was coaching at that time. I started coaching when I was like 18. But I was like, yeah, no, not my thing. So I went down to the registrar's office, because this is like before, we had computers, but like not really. And so I went down to the registrar's office. I'm standing in line, and I'm talking to this girl, and she's like, oh, what do you got to change? I'm like, oh, so I'm explaining the whole story. I was supposed to be ECU, and I got EDU. And she stops, looks straight at me, and she's like, what if you were meant to be a teacher? I was like, huh? And she's like, wouldn't that be weird if that was like what you were supposed to do? And she's like, and it wasn't a mistake. I have never met this girl in my entire life. I mean, just like, I can talk to a tree, I'll be very honest. And so I'm just like talking to this random girl in line, I was like, and then I'm like, what if I'm meant to be a teacher? I get out of line, I go back to my dorm room, and I called my mom, and I'm telling her about this, and she's like, why don't you just go to the class, see what you think? And she's like, she's like, you'll know really, really quickly whether or not this is for you. Like, okay, fabulous. I go to the class, and I was at Dominican University, again, a Catholic institution, which was huge for me. I originally started at Monmouth, and then went to Ivy, and then went to Dominican, and it was like, I was at home at Dominican, because we were back to the faith. Like, it was always in the background for me. I should have had it here, but it was back here. And so, called my mom, and she's like, well, I'll just go to the class. So I go to the class, and it was Sister Mary Catherine was the teacher for it. And I was like, all right, let's do this. That's it. I'm gonna be a teacher. I'm gonna be a teacher. And I'm like, and I'm gonna teach little kids. I went to my first clinical in a 2nd grade class, and a kid threw up on my shoes. And I was like, huh. I went back to Sister Mary Catherine's office, and I was like, I am going to change to secondary education. And I'm like, I've got all these biochem classes. I'm like, perfect. So that's how my path went that way. And I was like, that was it. It was like, wow, in my mind, I was like, huh, that's a coincidence. In reality, again, here was this plan, here was this path. I just had to see it and accept it and be like, oh, okay, Lord, this is what you're telling me. At that time, again, still did not know that. I always think it's funny when I go back to these things in my life, and I'm like, wow, I missed that one. I missed that sign. I'm like, thank you, Lord. So go to Dominican. I graduate from there. I taught in Chicago Public Schools for a year. That was interesting. I learned a lot. My husband, Justin, he was also at Dominican at that time, and then he was a year behind me in school. Took the longer road, and so I taught in Chicago Public Schools for the year, and then after he graduated, we got married in July, and then he got on at, it's up north, almost to Wisconsin, and of course, sorry, perimenopause is getting me right now. I can't remember the word. It was a county way up north, and I put in my application everywhere I could. And I did not get a job. I was like, oh, what am I gonna do? So he started up there, and then I was like, well, I guess I'm just gonna move back in with my mom and hopefully get a job around here. And then, as luck would have it, LaSalle County had an opening. Justin transferred from through that summer. He transferred from whatever county it was, I can't remember, to LaSalle County. And then the middle of July, I get a phone call from Milton Pope. I had sent out applications. I talk with my hands, I should have been Italian. I sent them out everywhere, could not get a job. So I was like, maybe I'll just sub, I'll figure it out. This was when there was like not a teacher shortage. These were the good times. And so got a call, a teacher had quit at the last minute, got a job, loved it, was living my best life. They had called me, I was coaching at Marquette. I'm like, this is great, this is fantastic. So I was coaching basketball at Marquette, I was coaching everything else under the sun at Milton Pope, teaching there, and then I was at basketball practice the one day. I'm literally in gym shorts and a t-shirt, and Mr. Spandit walked in, and he's like, hey, do you have a minute? I was like, yeah, sure. So I'm thinking, oh gosh, what do I do now? Instantly the principal comes in, you panic. And he said, what is your degree in? And I said, well, I have a biochem degree. And he's like, oh, I thought you taught math. I said, well, I have a math endorsement. And he was like, huh, what are the chances you'd want to teach math here? I was like, I guess pretty good. That would be cool. Yeah, that'd be great. So within a week, he offered me the job. I went in, I signed a contract. I went and gave my letter of resignation. I finished out the year at Milton Pope, but gave my letter of resignation. And then next thing you know, I'm back at Marquette. And I was like, huh, well, that worked out well. But everyone kept saying to me, they're like, you are not going to leave a public school to go to a Catholic school, are you? I'm like, yeah, I am. Yeah, I am. They're like, you do realize that there's not really like a retirement in a Catholic school? I was like, I was 24, so I was like, that's okay. doesn't matter. My husband's got a really good job. Fast forward 20 years, I'm like, oh. Anyways, so it was like everything again was falling into place. So I had what I called my 4-year plan. I was very meticulous about things that were happening in my 4-year plan. And it was ironically, when I was teaching at Milton Pope, I was in the cafeteria or the teacher lunchroom with Jeff Owens, for those of you who know Jeff Owens, and we had the same lunch period. Jeff is fantastic. He's an absolute hoot. If you don't know Jeff, have a quick conversation with him. You'll know him real well fast. And our superintendent hung a flyer for getting your Type 75 administrative certificate. And Jeff was like, I always thought about doing that. And I was like, I'll do it. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah, let's get our masters. So we signed up and we did this cohort together and just drove back and forth. And again, I'm like 24. So here I am, coaching a couple sports, driving, doing my masters, finally get on at Marquette, and then it was like everything just fell into place. Everything was going according to my 4-year plan. I was going to get, I was going to get a good job that I loved. I was going to be coaching, and at that point, I was the varsity volleyball coach. I was the JV basketball coach. I was the JV softball coach. But I was living my best life, and I was getting my master's. And I waitress on the weekends at the restaurant. So it was one of those, but it was like everything was going according to my plan. And then, Justin was like, hey, what about kids? I'm like, not really part of my plan. Not part of my plan. Definitely a part of God's plan. I'll never forget it. I was at basketball practice, and I was like, one of the girls had mono on my team. And so she was out, and I was so sick. I was so sick. And I kept thinking, I got mono. It's got to be mono. Went to the doctor. He's like, you got 9-month mono, sister. And it's like, beg your pardon? I have what? And, I was devastated. And I feel so bad when I say this now. I sobbed. I went to buy Anchi's, and I bought a large pizza. And I drove home. And I'm sitting at the kitchen counter, just eating my pizza and crying. And Justin walks in, because he was on afternoons at that point. And he walks in and he's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. And I'm eating my pizza. And he's like, well, you want pizza? He's like, yeah, I want pizza. So he's eating the pizza with me. And then finally I was like, I'm pregnant. And he's like, and he's so excited. And I'm like, this wasn't in my 4-year plan. He's like, you have a 4-year plan? I'm like, do you know me? I'm like, what? Yes, I have a 4-year plan. Not in my plan. But again, God's plan. And so, of course, at that point, I knew I really didn't like kids. There was a reason I was like high school and junior high. I really didn't like kids. I didn't plan on kids. And so my thought process was like, read as much as you can and learn as much as you can, because like I had a nephew, but he was more like a little brother, so I kind of like beat him up and didn't really I didn't really babysit. I did babysit a little bit, but like most people didn't ask me back. I mean, it was one of those type of things. So I read everything I could about this, how to have this, this baby. And do you guys remember the TLC show Bring Me Home Baby? That was my lifeline. I watched every single episode that I could, because I was like, I am bringing home this baby. And so I was like, I'm gonna know what I'm doing. I'm gonna be amazing at this, because it's one of those, if I'm gonna do something, like I am all in. I am all in. And so the day comes, I'm in labor, I'm like, this is it, bringing home baby. It was August 23rd, 2007, and that was right, remember the first 500-year flood we had? Yeah, where the football field and everything went under. I don't know if you guys remember that. Massive flooding all over LaSalle County. And that's when I went into labor. And so I think the barometric pressure just like threw me into it. So I go and I'm at the hospital, and I had her in Streeter. My best friend is a nurse over there, and so, but she's an ICU nurse, so she kept coming down and being like, how you doing? And I'm there and I'm like, this baby's coming out. And you watch the shows, and it's like a 30-minute turnaround. And my mom kept telling me, it's probably gonna be longer. And I was like, no, Mom, we're gonna have like 3 commercial breaks and this kid's gonna be out. Like, what are you talking about? 23 hours and 45 minutes after my water broke, Keely Raybrick welcomed into the world. as stubborn as she was throughout labor, that is how she continues to be today. And so, but it was just the whole time, I kept replaying these, and that moment when they hand you that baby, and the moms were like, I felt it that second that baby was in my arms, so I'm like, I'm waiting for my bringing home baby moment, I'm like, all right, she's out, and we didn't know what we were having, so like, it's a girl, I'm like, it's a girl, all that stuff. They kind of wipe them down. They bring her to me, and I was like, ugh, she was so ugly. Like, it was so gross. They don't show you that I'm bringing home baby. They're cute with a little hat. And I was like, When I tell that story, she's always like, can you really say it that way, Mom? Like, can we tone this down some? I'm like, it doesn't have the flair, Keely. It doesn't have the flair if I tone it down. So then they take her, they weigh her. She's 8 pounds, 21 inches. I mean, she was a big baby. They clean her up, and then they bring her back. Now she's got the cute little head. I'm like, oh, you're cute. Okay, I'll keep you. You're cute. But I don't know anything about this thing, and it's like I got a puppy, and I'm like, oh gosh, I gotta name it. I'm like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. The book said you're gonna do this, but then they just hand you it, and they're like, all right, there you go. And I'm like, oh, whoa. Are you gonna help me with this thing? And the nurses they're whipping them around. Oh, that first time watching them get that baby dress, I'm like, oh gosh, oh, you're gonna drop. Oh, okay. I just watched them do it, and then they brought in a little outfit. And they're like, you're gonna get her dressed, and I'm like, and she had these little skinny arms and legs, and I was like, I'm like, am I gonna break this thing? I was terrified, absolutely terrified. Like I said, I didn't babysit and stuff, so this was like my real first experience with a baby. My sister had her kids younger when we were younger, and I had waited for kids, and so I was the fun aunt. I was the aunt that Aunt Mindy would pick me up sometimes late at night from different establishments, and I climb between the car seats of her little girls. I'm like, hey guys, you want to go to McDonald's? And that was the fun aunt. So this is my first experience with a baby, and I kept thinking okay, where's that moment? That that connection moment, and I didn't have it. And I was like, oh, this was a bad idea. I shouldn't have done this. But I'm too far in now. So, they get you ready, and you're only there for a day, and then they send you on your merry way. And I'll never forget, they wheel you out, they put you in the car, they click in the car seat, they close the door, and I looked at Justin, and I was like, now what? And he's like, I don't know. And I was like, I thought you would know. I'm like, I don't know either. So I'm like, oh, good Lord. There's no instructions, nothing. I mean, this is wild to me. So we're driving home from Streeter, and he's telling me about, all the flooding, and during the time when I was in labor, they kept losing power, and I knew it was stormy terrible. And there was 15 other babies born. I was like, oh, no big deal. And so we're driving back, and we just got into Ottawa, and he's like, wait till you see the river. It's wild. And I'm like, oh, okay. And we just got to the edge of the bridge, and you could see how bad the flooding was. I mean, it was over the levee. It was terrible, a ton of destruction. And the second I saw that water, I was like, and it was that was my bringing home baby moment. I unbuckled my seatbelt. We had a truck, and I climb into the back seat of the truck, and he's like, what are you doing? I was like, go! And I'm yelling I'm screaming. I know I was a little erratic at that moment, and I'm like, you gotta drive, and he's like, why, what is wrong? I'm like, get over this bridge, and I'm screaming, I start crying, and I'm in the back seat, and I got her the handle under my arm, because in my mind, I'm like, if this bridge breaks and we go into the water, I have to figure out how I'm going to swim and carry this thing and get her to shore. That was my instant moment, boom. I will do whatever it takes in my power to make sure that this little critter will never experience any ounce of pain or sorrow or anything, and hell hath no fear, and God bless the poor souls who I have to go after because they might hurt this baby. I'm picturing the 17-year-old boys that I'm going to have to fist fight because they're going to break her heart. And it's all of those moments. But that was it. It was it just hit me like a truck. To know, I love this thing so much. There is nothing I won't do for it. And then when I got pregnant with my second daughter, I was like, oh man, am I gonna be able to love this one as much as I love that one? And it was like, but she was like, the second they put her in my arms, I was like, oh, come on in, buddy. And then the third one came. And then the fourth one came. And it's just so wild to think that, you have, I went from opposite ends of that spectrum to think like, I didn't even want kids. I was like, what? And then now it's like, that is my everything. And so as I got older and, wiser, it's just so wild to me and so interesting to me to like really kind of reflect upon that love. I go back to that love I have for my parents had for me, and to understand that. And, like I said, Dad standing in the back smelling like pig poop. But to not care what other people are going to think, just so that he could see me sing a 2-minute solo. The things that my mom had sacrificed and done to make sure that we had everything we needed, and just to even just get out of bed every day and continue to do things, and then to not have this, to have that love. It's like obviously you love your spouse, but there's something about that baby that just oof. But now as an adult, and especially in a Catholic school, it's so crazy to I all the time I go back to that concept of God's love and God's plan, and he had this perfect plan for me. He knew what I was going to be doing. I just didn't listen for a long time. But for him to keep putting that back into me and into my path to say, hey, no, here's an opportunity. Open your heart. But just listen. Don't talk. Just listen. Just hard for me. But then to experience that love as a parent, and now to reflect upon God's love for us. Like, can you imagine the enormity of his love for us? That he was willing to take his only son, give him to us sinners, and say, I am going to sacrifice him for you. That's like mind-blowing. Like, I don't even want my kid to get a paper cut. I don't. I mean, I will do anything to protect them. And just to know that his love for us is so incredible, and it is so deep, and it is so rooted that he would be willing to sacrifice his son for us. Like, wild to me. Absolutely wild. And so, that's always one of those things that I try and kind of bring back to the kids. Luckily, like I said, we still have senior retreat, and so the last couple of years the kids have asked me to speak at it, and so I'm not gonna lie, I stole my talk today from my senior retreat talk, and just bits and pieces. There's some things I don't tell the kids, but according to them, I was a straight A student, and my horns held up my halo, but the halo was there, but. That's one thing I really try to press to them, and I'm so lucky that I get to do that every single day. Every single day, I get to be a part of my faith. Every single day, I get to, if I need 5 minutes just to go sit in the chapel, it's there. And I always try and push that to the kids. I'm the first to say, I am not the beacon of faith. I am not the person. I would love to be that person, but I'm still working there. Still trying to get there, Lord. But to have the opportunity to every single day live my faith, be around my faith, to experience God's love, and then to push that on to kids, for them to understand God's love and for them to understand their faith, is just like the greatest gift I could ever have. I'm sure I could be making much more money if I was at a different school or doing different things, but like I said, God has that plan. He has that path for each of us. And just to experience that love, despite loss, despite heartache, despite bad things, there's still so much good. And to just kind of teach kids to focus on that good I feel like I have the best job in the world. And there's some days I'm not gonna lie, I really don't like my job, but most days I do. I'm like, there's a reason that I come back every single day. There's a reason that I kind of believe blue and gold, I guess I'll say. So it's kind of where I'm at. I haven't even looked at my phone. I'll be really honest. I kind of wavered away from what I was going to talk about, but I think, just like I said, just being able to live my faith on a daily basis through through these kids, through my kids, through our school is just the greatest gift we could have asked for. So thank you so much for letting me talk to you guys today. I hope I was semi-entertaining. Have a wonderful retreat. I was planning to stay with you the rest of the day, but like I said, I have 4 kids, and my third is playing in a regional championship at 11 o'clock in Lockport, so I am going to shoot to see her. So thank you guys. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for having me.